Hey everyone, so as an actuary, a mathematician and an investment researcher with over 10 years experience, I've always been looking to better understand the world we live in. That's what led me to systems theory, which I believe is one of the best ways to understand our world. So in this series, I'm going to run through different elements of systems theory and apply them to our daily lives. So let's get into it with adaptation and change. So this is actually my favorite topic within systems theory, and that's because I'm always looking to kind of grow and progress and improve. So here is a 7-step process to adapting and changing a complex adaptive system. So step number 1 is to identify a goal and find an algorithm to help you progress towards it. So your goal might be to save money for retirement. So the algorithm you're following is to spend less than you earn and invest the balance, and that's the algorithm to help you progress towards the goal of accumulating capital or wealth. Another goal might be to lose weight, so the algorithm you're following is putting yourself into a caloric deficit, and that's to help you progress towards your weight loss goal. You might be looking to improve endurance, so you're going to go and do some exercise regularly to help progress towards your goal. So you might be looking to increase the weight use you're lifting over time. Identify a goal and identify an algorithm to help you achieve that goal. Step number 2 is to take action within the system and observe the feedback you're getting. As I mentioned in a previous video, you either get reinforcing feedback or balancing feedback. If you're getting reinforcing feedback, that's brilliant. That means that you can just keep doing what you're doing. There's no need to slow down. A classic example of reinforcing feedback is compound interest. So there's no limit really to how much money you can put into that system, that algorithm, and the more you put in, the more you'll get out. Reinforcing feedback loops are fantastic because you get out a lot more than you put in. So if you can find a way that has a reinforcing feedback loop to get you towards your goal, then you're going to get there a lot quicker. However, you might be experiencing a balancing feedback loop, which means that the harder you're pushing, the harder the system pushes back, and that requires a slightly different approach. So step number 3 is to understand if you're in a homeostatic system, and that is, it means you're getting a balancing feedback loop. So the harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. So as I mentioned in my previous video about homeostatic systems kind of seek a baseline, which means they're always trying to return to the baseline where you started. So if you move from that baseline, it's always going to try and come back. Homeostatic systems are very common in biology because it's a very good way of making sure that things remain within a tolerable range, essentially. So your internal temperature, for example, your hunger levels, your thirst levels, making sure there's a decent static amount roughly of kind of water in your body or food in your body at any one time. So if in a homeostatic system, the harder you push, the harder the system pushes back, are you just completely stuck? Like, is it impossible to change a homeostatic system? Well, that's clearly not true because people change homeostatic systems all the time. I mentioned, weight loss is homeostatic, which means that your body kind of compensates if you put yourself in a caloric deficit. I mentioned your dopamine system is balancing as well, so dopamine levels all the time. So yeah, I think that's called hedonic adaptation, where you just get used to a certain level of dopamine over time. So you definitely can change the homeostatic system, and I think a lot of the time the underlying mechanism that's causing that change isn't obvious, and from the outside it looks like they're doing something very linear, or even doing something like that has a reinforcing feedback loop. The problem with weight loss and reinforcing feedback loops is that you would eventually just waste away and die if you had some sort of reinforcing feedback loop on weight loss. They're going to reach a point where you're going to reach a kind of right weight and achieve stasis around that. So see where you're in a homeostatic system and you can change them. Step number 4 is that you should engage in what's called allostasis to change a homeostatic system. And allostasis is the process of shifting the baseline of a homeostatic system over time. And this is possible in complex adaptive systems because complex adaptive systems learn and evolve when they're given a stimulus. So the process of allostasis I've mentioned before basically means what happens is when you give the system a stimulus, the system tries to incorporate that within its current range. It then borrows some from somewhere else if it can't incorporate it within its current range and tries to incorporate it in the short term. And if it can't incorporate it in the long term, then what happens is that system just shifts over time. So once you've decided you're engaging in allostasis, step number 5 is to implement hormesis. And hormesis is the process of applying a stimulus to a system to help it engage in allostasis. Hormesis is a term borrowed from biology. I think it comes from medicine and vaccination, where you give the body a small dose of foreign virus, for example, and the body kind of learns how to deal with it over time. So that's where the term comes from, but you can apply it across all different areas. So to lose weight, the hormesis effect would be to put yourself in caloric deficiency. If you're looking to increase strength, then you'd be lifting weights. And if you're looking to gain fitness, you're looking to give some sort of cardiovascular stimulus. So a key element of hormesis is you give the stimulus, but then you also allow for the recovery and adaptation, and that's a key phase, which is why allostasis involves rest and recovery, and it takes time for the system to adapt to the new stimulus it's been given. And then step number 6 is to do this regularly through the process of progressive overload. So rather than just giving the same dose of hormesis of whatever you're doing over time, the aim is to build that over time to help you progress and help the system change over time, and make sure you're incorporating in rest periods as well. And again, this method is nothing new, like everyone knows this. If you look at any marathon training plan, for example, what you do is you have progressive overload and then retrenchment periods. So you might increase your distance each week, and then you have a rest week, which allows your body to kind of recover and adapt. And you can apply this to all sorts of areas with your body, like so weight loss as well. It takes a while for your body to kind of move its baseline and recognize that it's going to be operating at a different caloric intake over time. And that's why people have rest days on their, or treat days on their diets. Yeah, expert advice tends to follow this kind of progressive overload, but I think lots of people don't see that structure beneath what people are doing to achieve certain goals. And because they don't see the underlying rest, they feel like, well, they don't understand the process of hormesis and allostasis. They're constantly just trying to go, which eventually leads to blow up, as I mentioned before, because the system pushes back harder than it's pushing. The step number 7 is just to continue this until you've achieved your goal. Try and look for other areas where you can apply this type of programming to better achieve your goals, because if you flow with the system, it's going to be a whole lot easier than if you're pushing against it. Mainly because you won't blow up, and then also because I think you would be a bit more mentally prepared for any kind of rest period or pullback. Because I think a lot of people that are very kind of progress focused, any rest period, they get a bit tense and want to keep progressing. But if you understand the underlying system that you're working with, then I think you're going to understand that it's the right thing to do. Lots of people in fitness training talk about you should rest as hard as you train. And that's definitely kind of following this allostasis formula. So there we have it. That was my video on adaptation and change with complex adaptive systems and how to do it over time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out more from me over here. Cool, thanks.